Let's have a bit of a broader look at the state of the pandemic right now and talk about that with Dr. Uwe Janssens. He's an intensive care doctor here in Germany and the former president of the German Association for Intensive Medicine. Dr. Janssens, here in Germany, one of the country's leading virologists has made headlines by saying the pandemic is over. From your perspective as an intensive care doctor, do you agree?
Yeah, the World Health Organization announced the end of the global pandemic back in September this year. In this respect, I also agree with Christian Drost and Christian Karaganidis, also an intensive care medicine colleague, who also predict the end of the pandemic in Germany. We will certainly still experience one or the other small wave of infections. SARS-CoV-2 does not currently play the dominant role, but other respiratory pathogens, above all the influenza virus and RSV viruses. In the 50th week, about 9 million people had a new acute respiratory illness. The persistently very high numbers of infections continue to exceed the peak values that are usually reached in the strong influenza waves. The overall proportion of patients hospitalized with severe respiratory illness diagnosed with influenza was 28% in the week 50, and the proportion of COVID-19 was only 11%.
Now, how do you see COVID affecting our lives in the future?
Yes, I'm certainly sure that in the future we will have to deal with SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19, but I'm quite sure it will not reach the proportion hospitalized on intensive care medicine and other way. We have to deal with that infection as we have to deal with the influenza, and we have to live with this, and we have to encounter new viruses in the next decades, which may hit us as well as SARS-CoV-2 did.
Talking about new viruses, right now China is battling a wave of infections. How big is the risk of new variants emerging from there? Briefly, if you can.
So I think at the moment the huge number of infections, that is a risk that some mutants develop. It could be, but that is not sure. And leading virologists also say it could be, but that's not sure. So we should take any measure to protect ourselves, and people traveling to China should wear mouth masks and they should be vaccinated. That's quite sure. At the moment, we don't see any urgency for new variant of concerns coming from China, but that is a threat. I agree.
Intensive care doctor Uwe Janssens, thank you very much for your opinion.
Thank you.
Now, 3 years into the pandemic, more than 650 million people around the world have tested positive for COVID-19. While the vast majority recovers, some are burdened by longer-lasting symptoms. The condition is called long COVID. The symptoms differ from person to person. Long COVID is diagnosed if symptoms persist for more than 3 months after the infection. Well, studies suggest 7 to 10% of people who've had COVID-19 can be affected by long-term symptoms of varying severity. The World Health Organization is calling for more research into long COVID as well as better treatments for those affected. Now, our reporter Pippa Stevens went to visit an interactive exhibition here in Berlin where she experienced what long COVID actually feels like.
Between 5 and 10 patients with the coronavirus will go on to develop long COVID. Fatigue is one of the main symptoms. One paper estimates 46% of people with the condition will suffer exhaustion. I'm in front of one of the exhibits here, which is a weighted vest, which together with these weighted armbands and leg bands weighs about 20 kilos. Now, the idea with this is to emulate the feeling that people with long COVID have of a very sort of large pressure on the chest and shortness of breath. I heard one account of a man who couldn't read his children a bedtime story because he described this sandbag on his chest. I try the leg and arm weights on, along with the suit, to see what it's like. I try walking up the stairs. I already feel really quite out of breath just walking up those stairs, and I'm conscious that my heart is beating quite a lot harder than usual. I feel quite sick, to be honest, as well with the effort of the weights, and my body's also in a bit of pain from sort of supporting the weights. People with long COVID are advised to keep moving to help with their rehabilitation. The centre uses virtual reality to encourage that, with activities like football, archery or boxing. The hope is that by increasing their strength, long COVID patients can get back to their lives. What I've really taken from this exhibition is not only how all-consuming and intense having long COVID could be, but also how difficult it could be to function in everyday life. Now, there are around 200 symptoms associated with long COVID, so any treatment would be highly individual in how it was tailored. Still, not very much about it is known medically, but the centre told me what it does do is point people in the right direction of medical care and also towards support groups that can help them cope.